As a serial entrepreneur with almost 20 years of experience, Paul Brassard is one of the co-founders and managing partners of Volition, an award-winning international advisory and events firm for startups and entrepreneurs. Since 2015, Paul and the Volition team have helped guide hundreds of entrepreneurs on their journey towards success and hosted over 80 pitch events and workshops across Canada, the US, and Europe. With a passion for knowledge sharing and building connections, Paul provides expert guidance on pitch, presentation, business, growth, and fundraising strategy. Bonus, he's one of us, right here from Northern BC. Welcome, Paul. April Bellia loves helping other entrepreneurs in the startup stage. April's professional career started as a cake designer under the namesake April Cakes. Her next company, Granola Girl, was founded in 2008 and sold just recently in 2020. April is also a co-founder of the Serendipity Tea Party networking events. Since 2015, April has been an intuitive coach and a startup business consultant. Most recently, April has been certified as a guide to help others discover their sacred gifts and start living on purpose. Welcome, April.
Welcome, welcome. How are you two? Can you both hear me? Yeah, you can all hear. So I just wanted to show this mug because we have a question from one of the classes. Is that Wayne's face on a mug? And it is Wayne's face. So had we known it was going to be so popular, I was going to say we have iCubed mugs. And so homeboy Paul there has his mug on there, and we're going to, yeah, totally. Just take that photo and let's start off that way. Okay, I got to put this down to be able to interview you guys. So welcome both. I'm so excited you can both join us. You know, the two of you have come to us as I think our in-house serial entrepreneurs, and I can say this fondly because I too am one. Absolutely love that startup and building phase of businesses. You both also help entrepreneurs in their startup phases and throughout their businesses. So I thought, before we jump into, you know, starting with your why, we're going to back up a bit and maybe discuss kind of how each of you got initially hooked into being entrepreneurs. You know, I'll start with you, April. How did you get hooked in becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, for me, I had to know myself. And what I know about myself is I'm very creative. I'm a problem solver and I'm a visionary. I feel that I have great ideas and I wanted to be my own boss. So obviously I've had jobs, but maybe my ideas weren't heard or it took too long to execute and it had to go up the ladder before it could actually be a real thing. So I really love the idea of coming up with an idea and then doing it myself without having to rely on other people. And that's what got started for me.
That was the Kool-Aid. Okay. And Paul?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think inherently it was kind of in my blood, not realizing it when I was younger, but as I got older, it was sort of, I naturally kind of fell into it. I think in part because I just got it's similar to April, I kind of got tired of being told what to do. And not necessarily that I wanted to tell other people what to do, but I wanted to solve problems. I wanted to help people, and I wanted to do it on my own terms and my own, like deciding my own schedule. And you know, I guess it's not as easy as it sounds, but deciding it on my own terms, I guess, is really the answer. So I kind of, in my case, I kind of fell into it.
Yeah, so freedom, really, by the sounds of for both of you. And so
to an extent,
to an extent, I was going to say, we've all been entrepreneurs that have stayed up, you know, it's 4:00 in the morning and I'm thinking I have the worst boss ever. It's me, making me work so late. And so for the two of you here, because you see a lot of businesses, you must see a lot of patterns. And what do you see as kind of patterns that, especially in the startup phase, that are mistakes that entrepreneurs make often, that you're saying, okay, that's something that I noticed and it's a reoccurring kind of thing? What are some of the mistakes that you see, biggest mistakes that you see entrepreneurs make?
I'm going to let April go first because I know that she can speak to the why part and really well. And I have a suspicion she has something really great to say about that.
Go ahead, April.
Okay, well, there's going to be a few, but the main mistake is people execute too quickly. They might have an idea and it might be great, but then they start investing in branding, they start doing merchandise, they start building a website, but they haven't fully addressed the important foundations of building a business, which is really the topic of why we're doing it, and getting very, very clear about your whole reason for creating the business in the first place. And then coming up with a solid plan before executing. And having a mentor who can guide you through this process so that you don't jump in with both feet too quickly without enough information. And that's probably the breakdown of a lot of businesses, is because they eventually get stuck, or they get misled by themselves, or they think that, all of this fun stuff is going to last, and it eventually dies off.
Yeah. That's perfect. I mean, definitely in our entrepreneurship course, we talk about minimum viable product, to get that part. And I think sometimes the danger of some businesses is they have all this money and they're putting it right in right away. And it's kind of like, think it through, think it out. And so how about you, Paul? What do you see as a pattern?
Yeah, I would say it's probably a lot of the same. And I was a culprit of that when I was young in my entrepreneurial career, just thinking like, oh, I can totally do this, and I've got all the energy and time and everything's going to be great. I think one of the biggest mistakes as well is not necessarily biding your time properly, I think. So I absolutely agree with April. I'm pointing that way because she's that way from me on my screen. Actually, I guess she's that way.
This way.
No, I keep going the wrong way. It's backwards on my screen. It's backwards. Yeah, for you too. Anyway, so I totally agree with what April said. But I think, if I could go back and tell my younger self something, it would be, I know when you're a young entrepreneur, you feel like you have all the time, all the energy, but be careful of balancing things. There is only so much time, energy, and bandwidth. And for myself, I had some health issues later on because I wasn't taking the time for myself. And we have to be really careful of burning ourselves out or exhausting ourselves. So, it's easy to say now that I'm older, but things like learning how to say no is a big one. Having the worry that you're never going to have enough, when actually there's almost always more than enough. If you're connecting to what April was saying, if you're doing something that's connected to your why and your passion, there will be enough, because you'll find people who are valued.
Perfect. And so the next question really is kind of why we gathered here, is around starting with your why. You have a great program April, called Finding Your Sacred Gifts. And in that why is it important that businesses find their why?
Well, I want everyone here to know that you can build a business based on what you're good at. And in fact, you should base a business on what you're good at. And not only that, what you love. So these are pretty much the two questions you're going to start asking yourself if you do plan to build a business. What am I good at, and what do I love? Because eventually, when you build something based on your passion and it becomes your purpose, then it doesn't feel like you're going to be working a single day in your life. And this is why it's hard to say no, and why we burn out, because we're doing something we love so much that you would never even want to turn it off. Like, you just want to keep doing this 24 hours a day, eat, sleep, dream, repeat. While you're sleeping, you're dreaming of your business because you love it and you're so passionate about it. And so Sacred Gifts helps you identify what are your strengths, what are your gifts that you're naturally born with. I mean, we've seen videos of kids playing drums at 2 or 3 years old, and they've never had a single lesson in their life. Yeah. So that is a natural born gift. And there are 24 gifts in total. And when you identify what your gifts are, then we can go into a formula, which is called the Feel on Purpose formula, which is where you want to start building your business on this foundation. And essentially, that is your why.
Perfect. Thank you. I know that in our Entrepreneurship 12, there is an entire module around, it doesn't seem like it fits in the business because we're asking the students to reflect on themselves, but it absolutely has to do with that in later on when they go through the coming up with ideas and all of that piece as well. And Paul, you coach businesses all the time on pitches. You know, you run, I know in our video we said 80 pitch competitions, but I realized as that was playing, it's been a whole year. You're probably well over a couple hundred now.
Not quite. We just did our 102nd.
Oh, wow. Wow. So that's that's a lot. So as a coach for business pitching, why is it important they have their why and they share that part in the presentation?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's actually, I mean, that's a really good question. And ultimately what it comes down to is at the end of the day, people connect with you one way or the other, right? So, I mean, you're not going to connect with everybody, but at the end of the day, you're going to have people that are going to connect with you or they're looking to make connections. I mean, it's kind of the human condition, right? So, you know, when you're pitching and presenting, I guess I would fast forward that if you were ever in a position that you're fundraising, for example, you know, a lot of early stage investors, really what they're looking for is the why is this person doing this? They're really investing more in the person and the team, assuming there is one, rather than necessarily the business, because the business can change. Even my company, Volition, we've changed drastically over the last year, and are now doing business globally, which is crazy to think about. So business will always change. It has a tendency to do that. It evolves based on the team, on the people, on the customer demands. But the people involved, even though they evolve, they're still the base of that company, right? So investors are really kind of looking at them. So even at the same end, if you're thinking about, you know, attracting new team members, customers, even early customers, I've had many instances where, for myself or clients I've worked with, where they, you know, they get a customer, even though they're a startup and there's more established companies doing something longer, better, whatever, but they go with the startup because they really connect. Or even in my case, like I've had a few customers that are like, I'm going to go with you because I really believe in what you're doing. And I can tell through your passion, I believe in what you're doing. And even though you're a startup, you don't have that much experience with it yet, I'm going to give you a chance, right? And that shines through in the way you present, and presenting builds confidence. And there's a whole slew of things I could add on to that, but that's really, really important.
We say that all the time. It's funny, we do the exit kind of questions for our course, and one of the number one things students talk about is building that confidence because they're used to presenting, or they get practice in presenting. And that's something that the more you get practice at it, the better you can get at it. And I always say to my kids, you know, when they want more tech time or they want more whatever, more, they always seem to want more, I always say, and why? You know, convince me kind of thing. And so that convincing and that managing to tell that story and that conviction and the why is something you can use regardless. You know, there's probably students out there that are thinking, I never want to run my own business. But having that conviction and be able to tell someone your why of why you want anything, why you want more tech time, why you want more, you know, candy or food or whatever it is an excellent tool to have. So on that, is there something that skill-wise that you are, I guess, would suggest to students? I mean, our students are grade 10, 11, 12. Besides the presenting one, what are some other skills that they can kind of work on? And I know Maddie talked a bit about skill stacking. For each of you, what kind of skills would you highly recommend the younger version of yourself have built? April, you start.
Well, I don't know if you can classify this as a skill, but I would just say if you're a dreamer, keep dreaming. And not only dream, but dream big. Like, we can set limits for ourselves, but you want to surpass that. Because, you know, when they say shoot for the moon, you'll reach for the stars and you'll still land among the stars. But it doesn't stop there. Like, you're a dreamer, but you also have to be motivated enough to act. right? Like there's a quote, the world needs dreamers and the world needs doers, but most of all, the world needs dreamers that do. So if you are action based and you don't just talk the talk, I hate using all these cliche lingos, but it's true. You got to really walk the talk, because I'm a type of person who I think of something and I want it done yesterday. But there are people I know who are still talking about their dreams like 5 years later, 10 years later. And I'm like, why don't you actually do something about it? And it will at least take you one step closer to what you ultimately want. So if you have an idea, if you have a goal, what are some things that you can do that are going to get you closer and not be distracted by all the shiny objects and things that are pulling you left and right, when really all you want to do is move forward? So if you can be determined and focused and have that grit, that grit that is going to make you work longer hours or go beyond your comfort zone, those are definitely traits of an entrepreneur. Is you're going to get uncomfortable, you're going to get rejected, you have to build a thick skin. And if you can't hack that in your first few years, long term, it's probably going to really affect you and prevent you from being fully successful.
Sounds good. How about you, Paul? What are some skills?
Yeah, I want to touch on something that April said about the thick skin part. So I think my uncle taught me years ago. It was one of the first lessons I learned in business, I would say, that I can remember anyway, where he said, like, just remember that no in business never really means no. It can be no as in KNOW. It just means that you need to know more or they need to know more. And so, but I would say, so don't let fear of rejection get in your way. There's always much more out there. There's always more business to be had. And sometimes it just takes those conversations. I've got another company right now that I just recently launched called Straws and Stuff. And I actually remember our team member, Gabby, at first was kind of like, ooh, sales, I don't know. But then I just said, well, it's actually just really getting out there and having conversations. Let's just find out how we can help the customers. And then she got out, started having conversations. And within like the first 3 customers she visited afterwards, she's like, actually, it's not so bad. It's just really talking to them. And actually they have a need. We can help them. And now we want to help them. Right. So I would say another really big skill, it's not something I would go back and tell myself, but I would say that it's something that really benefited me over the years. And I think was kind of a natural ability I had, was developing relationships and keeping those connections. Because I've still got contacts today that like a friend of mine named Jeff, he's like one of the first website development projects I ever did. I don't do website development now, but way back in the day, that was my first business in part. And he was one of my first clients. And he just messaged me the other day. He's like, hey, Paul, do you still do website development? I'd love to work with you again. And I was like, oh, dude, sorry, I don't do it. But I can connect you with somebody that does. Right. So building those connections and relationships, and it's really, really important that network. I'm sure April would probably agree with that. Like the power of network is so important in today's world, today's business world.
Yeah.
And quite honestly.
Regular world, I think.
Don't burn any bridges.
Yeah, don't burn any bridges, build that community. So we've got some questions popping up on our question wall. And so thank you so much for asking it. And there has been one that has been voted up. So those of you that are on the community board, your student ambassadors, you can vote questions up. So one of the questions, which I don't know if we can fully encompass, but really it says, can you give an overview of the steps of how you actually got your business off the ground? And so that's something that, are you able to sum that up? I know it's been different pivots and things like that. I'll start off with you, Paul. Yeah, I was going to say, which one? Why don't we talk about Volition, and then, and for April, I'd love to hear Granola Girl, because that's a product and one's a service, and it's kind of the dual. Yeah. So Paul, do you want to give a synopsis? I know.
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I've had an extensive career kind of in the startup world, predominantly in tech. I really got my real start in like back when, I mean, this is going to really age me, but back when Facebook was just coming up. And so that was kind of my first taste of tech. And then that's when I started pitching a lot and started building up that skill. And just over time, at the time, I started a company called Elevator with the idea of just consulting startups and helping them out. And it just kind of piggybacked my experience. So that was back in 2015. At the time, I had a digital agency. And it just started kind of naturally happening. Like I started getting more and more requests. Oh, Paul, can you help me with my pitch and presentation? Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And I was like, oh, maybe there's something to this. So I started just kind of growing that. And eventually that evolved, in part because I brought on my business partner, Melanie, and she's incredible. And just kind of the way it naturally evolved. So in 2017, we became Volition. And it has evolved and grown tremendously since then. I think we're coming up on 20 people today, as of today. And we have a new person starting today, actually, right after this this session. And so we're continuing to grow. We're doing business globally now. And it's really, really cool. The one I think that is also neat is my company Straws and Stuff, which actually just happened by accident. A friend of mine named Artem, one day we were walking and he was like, hey, I think there's an opportunity in this, in straws. And I was like, what? And he said, well, I have a friend that has insight into a factory in Ukraine that can make these reed straws. It's a type of wheat and paper straws. And he's like, I think there's a huge opportunity. Will you help me build it? And I figured I was just helping him, like whatever, no big deal as a friend. And then he made me a business partner, like a shareholder in the company. And now we're growing. We're getting customers. We've got product coming in. It's so a lot of it is just kind of discovering opportunities, solving problems, having that entrepreneurial mindset to listen.
I was going to say,
yeah. And then connect it with your passion. Although I never would have said I would be passionate about straws. I know you might say, like, really? But I am passionate about helping the world and the planet, right? And that it does.
And also, I think it's all of the pieces that you said here to kind of tone it down is really following your curiosity. There weren't specific steps of like showing up for this class and getting, you know, and starting this business. It was more following your curiosity, talking to people, building a team around you, because it's hard to do business on your own. I mean, you can definitely start it, but to build it, it's really hard on your own. And so a lot of that,
I laugh because we have a joke at the office, which is that my job is to sleep under my desk and build a great team around me so I can sleep more under my desk.
More under
your
desk.
Anybody who really knows me, I'm not anybody who
not
really
under
knows
your
me
desk.
knows
Okay, good.
I barely sleep, but it's kind of the running joke. Yeah.
I was going to get you to talk about how you started Granola Girl. I don't know if you can sum it up because there's a whole bunch of questions about passion that I do want to ask. So, but Granola Girl was a product. So how did you start that? Like, was it just you mixing pieces together?
Yeah. So for 12 years, I had a home-based wedding cake business. And then I thought, okay, well, this is seasonal. This is full of sugar. I want to create something more healthy that's an everyday product that people can consume throughout the year. So when I started making it at home and giving it out to friends for Christmas, I joined a market as well. And the customers loved it. They wanted to buy more of it. And even people who didn't like granola, right? So I guess I tested it in the market. People loved it. They wanted more of it. So I had to make it an official business and go through the steps, which is, a lot to learn when you've never done this before, entering a whole new industry, the grocery industry that I was not familiar with, in a male-dominated industry, actually. So when I showed up with this, like this is the package, it's like the men were saying, why is it pink? Why is it called Granola Girl? So I was up against a lot of backlash and they didn't understand. So I toughened up. I had answers for every single question out there because essentially I was selling this and I was convincing people that they need it in their life and they needed it every day and they needed more. But the product spoke for itself. Once you tried it, it's visually beautiful. So it became a creative outlet for me as well. But most importantly, it became the outlet for me to connect with other people. And I want to piggyback off of Paul because connection and relationships is, I feel, really the heart and the currency of entrepreneurship, right? It's a small city that we live in Vancouver, but a product this good can really have the potential to go global, right? So you're going to have the backing of the people who you've worked with. And this is the first time I met Paul. He was like at a desk working on Elevator. And I was like, what does that mean? And I was like, yeah, elevator pitch, of course. Like, it makes sense now. But yeah, to get the product from my kitchen to the grocery store was a lot of learning, a lot of guidance, talking to the people who have done it. But again, not everyone was sharing so easily because they were essentially competitors trying to fight for the shelf space. And so they weren't generous with the information they were willing to share with me. So now I actually help people get their product onto the shelves because I feel like there is no competition. There's only collaboration. And if we help each other, then we all rise together, right?
Which is, I think, both of what you guys do. You share so much of your expertise so that entrepreneurs, so we see you as almost like the mentors that we have in our Entrepreneurship 12 course that end up mentoring to guide the students into thinking deeper in different layers of their business as well. So I don't want to go without answering a passion question because there are people voting it up as well. So it says, if you have more than one dream, what should you do to identify which one you are really passionate about? And before you answer that, I just want you to know that the two people sitting here have more than one dream. So it's something definitely you have followed many different passions. So I'd love for you each to maybe end with that kind of question of how to guide someone that feels like they've got their hands passionate in a lot of things. So, yeah.
Okay, I'll go first. Passion is felt in your body, okay? Like, how do you want to wake up in the morning? Do you want to wake up pressing the snooze button? Or do you want to wake up jumping for joy, can't wait to start the day? And if you're not passionate about starting your day, you got to think about, what am I doing that's not including passion in my life? And in my body, and it's going to be different for everyone, passion feels like, this overflow and overwhelming burst of energy that makes your heart want to sing, right? So think of like your most exciting day of the year. Do other things in your life bring you that kind of joy and that kind of excitement? And if it's feeling like, you feel small or heavy and dark, it's definitely not a passion. So you have to experience the contrast to know what something passionate really truly feels like. And if you can tell the difference between, am I passionate about this? Am I more passionate about that? Am I drawn to that? And your body will actually lead you. It's like it's more like a magnetic effect, right? When I'm drawn to this, when I'm pulled towards that, it's pulling me away from something. Or if I'm in a situation that I'm not so happy with, how does my body feel? Because if you don't listen to that, eventually, you could run up against a sickness or something shuts down. And there's going to be a penalty to pay when you're not following your passion.
Yeah. And so you've done that between the wedding cakes, then the Granola Girl, and then now this one, you've continued to follow. So it's always kind of taking a look at what excites you the most in this moment and continuing on to follow that. And how about you, Paul? What do you think, if someone has more than one dream? You must get entrepreneurs that come to you and say, I want to build this, but I kind of like this business too. Like, so what is it? How?
I want to say something based on what April was saying. Something, though, is that I don't ever want to tell people that entrepreneurship is like an easy ride. I mean, it is one thing. I mean, that's what is kind of important about the passion part. I think going back to even the first question you asked, right? Like, why is the passion so important? Why is so important? I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, you might wake up with joy and you might be like, okay, I'm really excited about this business. I'm really passionate about it. But let's not kid ourselves. There's also days that you're like, it's tough.
Yeah.
And not every day in entrepreneurship is easy. It's not all sitting on the beach and drinking Mai Tais and living it easy. As some like entrepreneur, like if you watch TV or movies, sometimes they show the entrepreneur and they're just working off their laptop on the beach and it's like it's super easy, right? It's not really like that. Like there are definitely days where I wake up and I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a tough one. But what ultimately gets me out of bed is like, okay, but there's some awesome stuff going on. And for me, a lot of it for me actually really is the team. Like a lot of it for me is being able to come into the office. I know it's tough with COVID right now, but being able to come into the office where I am right now, you can't really see it, but I'm here with my marketing assistant Gabby and
listening to this whole
Isabel's
interview
behind me. And so I have to say, like, a large part of it that for me that drives it is the team and the people I work with. So that really gets me going. Now, the funny thing is the question that you asked me about, how do you, the focus part, I mean, that's a constant, I'm going to say for me, that's a constant battle. Because when I started Volition, I told my wife that this was going to be it. This is the last business I'm going to start. Actually, it was with Elevator because I exited from my previous business. And then she was like, oh, are you going to go get a job now? And I was like, how do I get a job? How do you even build a resume? I have no idea how to do that. I haven't done that in 15 years. Yeah, I was like, what? And I did go for interviews, but then it was like they kept saying the same thing, like, oh, you've been an entrepreneur so long, we're not so sure. Like we think you'd be great, but we feel like you're going to leave shortly after because you'll find something. I told my wife that Elevator, which became Volition, was going to be the last one. And now what's really funny is when you ask me that question, I'm actually looking at I have windows in front of me that we use as whiteboards, which are like our task lists. And I have one for Straws and stuff, one for something called Pressbox Pools, which is another passion project that I'm working on. And then one for BrickClick. And then behind me is one for Volition. And it's like, but I'm following my passions, but how I'm making it work is like I said, I'm finding the people to work with that I can sleep under my desk. So like I'm doing the work. Yeah. And I can find the right people to help me make these things happen. So
perfect.
I will say there's something to be said about focusing on something or maintaining focus. How do you choose? Yeah, I think I have to go with April. It's the thing that probably excites you the most. Yeah. If you're not excited or passionate about it, that's the toughest thing, right? That's what I see from a lot of entrepreneurs is not a lot. From some entrepreneurs I work with is like, you can tell when they're not actually that passionate about it because when the going gets tough, they basically consider just giving up. Now there are times where sometimes it's just not working. Like honestly, something I teach a lot of my students students mostly, because I teach at a couple colleges is, I'll tell them that honestly, at the end of the day, a lot about business it's like a grand science experiment, which is great for the students we're probably talking to right now, because they probably remember the science experiments of like hypothesis, test, conclusion, right? It's actually a lot like that. And sometimes the conclusion will be that it doesn't work. It's not something the market wants or needs right now. But usually from that failure, it's learning, right? So I have to say there's been a lot of grand science experiments. I know I'm talking about the successes right now, but I've had other science experiments that haven't gone well. But that's taught me and helped me get to where I am now.
And that's the perfect time. I mean, for us, that's a good question to kind of end on, because part of our course really gives the students space to play and to test ideas, to see if they're passionate, to see if it resonates with them, so that when they do their final project, it's something they actually want to do. So time is ticking way too fast, and Wayne is itching to get back on. So there are lots of questions in the Q&A. If you two could, I don't know if you can have time to head on to Whova and maybe answer some of those questions. We have way more questions than any other panel so far. And so if the two of you can head back onto Whova and answer those, we can pass things over to Wayne. And thank you so much for your time and for sharing so much wisdom in such a short amount of time. So thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.